Ever get that feeling, like someone's totally rubbing you the wrong way?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like deeper than just like their taste in music or something.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
makes you wonder, right? What's going on
Yeah,
there?
right.
Well, Hermann Hesse,
Yeah.
the guy who wrote Siddhartha,
Mm-hmm.
he had that really interesting thought about this.
Okay.
He said, if you hate someone, you hate something in them that is part of yourself. What isn't part of ourselves doesn't disturb us.
Wow.
Deep, right?
Yeah, that's pretty profound.
And it kind of gets to the heart of what we're diving into today, which is this whole idea of projection.
Projection, yeah.
And I know it can sound kind of like, Psych 101,
Sure.
but trust me, this stuff is way more relatable than you might think.
Okay.
So think of it this way. Ever walk into like a super messy room
Oh, yeah.
and you just like instinctively want to clean it up?
Absolutely.
It's like this urge to fix something outside of ourselves, right?
Totally.
Well, sometimes our brains do that with emotions too.
Oh, interesting.
Like in dealing with our own stuff, we project it outwards.
Like a defense mechanism almost.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
it's our brain's way of kind of like protecting us from those parts of ourselves that we don't really want to look at.
Right, like that box of old photos you shove in the back of the closet, out of sight, out of mind. Right.
Exactly. Okay, so let's say like I'm super bothered by someone's, I don't know, arrogance.
Okay.
Is that where Hesse's quote comes in?
It absolutely could be, yeah.
Okay.
But projection, it suggests that what really bugs us in other people
Yeah.
often reflects something back at us. Maybe not on the same level, not to the same degree,
Right.
but those intense feelings that get triggered,
Mhm.
that's the part where we need to do a little digging.
So it's not like necessarily about them being arrogant.
Right.
It's about maybe how I deal with those feelings in myself.
You're getting there.
Okay, interesting.
It's not always that simple,
Right.
but you're on the right track. And it's not just our negative traits that we project either.
Oh, really?
We do it with positive stuff too.
Huh. I never thought of that.
Yeah, anything we haven't fully dealt with or accepted within ourselves, it can become something we project onto others.
So it's like bigger than just, I don't know, disliking something in someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's about how those things reflect back to us. Is that where this whole shadow self thing comes in?
The shadow self.
Yeah, it sounds kind of ominous when you say it like that, to be honest.
Right. I can see why it sounds kind of scary,
Yeah.
but it's not as intimidating as it sounds. Think of it like this.
Okay.
We all have this idea of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Person we want to be, our best selves.
Right.
But let's face it, that's not the whole picture.
True.
We all have those parts we'd rather not think about,
Hey.
the parts that don't really fit that ideal image.
Right, right.
And those parts, we tend to kind of tuck those away
Mm-hmm.
into the shadow, as it were.
Okay, so the shadow.
Yeah, it's like that drawer in your kitchen, the one.
Oh, yeah, the one that's full of random stuff.
Exactly. It's full of stuff we don't even know what to do with.
Right, you just kind of shove it in there.
It's the same with those parts of ourselves. We haven't quite figured out how to make them fit.
Right.
And sometimes those parts, they get a little reactive,
Okay.
especially when we see them reflected in other people,
Oh, interesting.
particularly in our closest relationships.
Makes sense. So we're talking like when we see those shadowy parts in other people,
Mm-hmm.
it's like they're holding up a mirror.
Exactly.
And that can't be comfortable.
No, not really.
Like who wants to look in a mirror when they're having a bad hair day,
Right. And it's funny,
Yeah.
the blog we were talking about, it actually mentions how the people who really push our buttons,
Yeah.
they're usually reflecting back the stuff we've tried hardest to bury.
Oh, interesting.
It's like the things we judge most harshly in ourselves, we're often the quickest to judge in other people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that whole saying,
Mm-hmm.
we hate in others what we hate in ourselves,
Yeah.
it's like actually kind of true.
There's definitely some truth to that, yeah.
No.
It's not necessarily about hate per se, but
Yes.
it's about recognizing that,
Yeah.
those strong reactions we have,
Mm-hmm.
they often come from our own, unaddressed stuff.
Okay.
So, for example, if we're constantly annoyed by someone who's always seeking attention,
Okay.
it might be worth asking ourselves,
Yeah.
how comfortable are DBE with,
Yeah.
expressing our own needs?
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's like we're trying to manage our own stuff
Mm-hmm.
by focusing on what's happening outside of us.
Exactly. And that outward focus,
Yeah.
that's where projection really takes hold,
Wow.
Instead of dealing with those messy feelings inside,
Right.
we just project them out onto other people.
And that can't be good for our relationships.
No, not at all. relationships, they're like a magnifying glass for projections.
Huh? How so?
They just bring all that stuff bubbling to the surface,
Have those unaddressed needs and like insecurities.
All of it.
Wow.
Yeah, and the blog talks about how like unmet needs and expectations, they can really fuel projection in relationships.
Okay.
So let's say, for instance, you're in a relationship and you constantly feel unappreciated.
Oof. Yeah. I've been there.
Yeah, it's a common one, right? And look, it's totally possible that your partner needs to, step up their appreciation game.
Right.
But there's also a chance that projection could be playing a part.
Okay, how so?
Like, if deep down you have this belief that you're not really worthy of appreciation.
Oh, wow.
You might unconsciously be trying to get validation from your partner.
To kind of like fill that void.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. So instead of like addressing that belief within ourselves, we're hoping that someone else will fix it for us.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to outsource our own self-worth.
And that's never going to work out well, is it?
No, not usually. And that's where it becomes this like vicious cycle.
Oh, how so?
Because when our partners inevitably fall short.
And they always do.
Well, nobody's perfect.
True.
But when they fall short of these like unrealistic expectations, we just feel even more hurt and resentful.
Oh, I see.
And that just confirms those negative beliefs that we have about ourselves.
So it's like we're setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Exactly.
So then how do we break free?
Well, it starts with awareness.
Okay.
Like noticing those patterns.
In how we react to things.
Exactly. And then, we have to ask ourselves,
Yep.
Is this really about them or is this about me?
So it all starts with awareness.
Awareness? Yeah.
Like being aware of those moments where we're like totally overreacting to something.
Yeah, exactly. The blog talks about this. It's a self-acceptance. It starts with that awareness.
Okay.
Like paying attention to those times when we're feeling like super emotional and it seems a little extra,
Right, like out of proportion to what's actually happening.
Exactly.
So instead of just like getting swept up in the drama of it all,
right,
we got to like hit the pause button.
Yeah, take a step back.
And ask ourselves,
what's really going on here? Is this about them or is it about me?
Okay, and then what?
Well, that's where the real work begins,
Okay.
It's not about like blaming ourselves for these reactions. It's more about like approaching those shadow parts with curiosity.
Oh, interesting.
Trying to understand like, why am I reacting this way?
So it's like being a detective in our own minds.
Exactly.
Trying to understand the motives of these like hidden shadow characters.
I love that analogy. And once we understand those motives, like what's driving these reactions, we can start to address them with compassion.
Okay, so how do we actually do that?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Right.
It's not about like trying to get rid of parts of ourselves.
Okay.
We're trying to be someone we're not.
Right, right.
It's more about recognizing that we're like these complex beings. We have both light and shadow inside of us.
Right.
And those shadow parts,
yeah,
they often hold the key to our biggest growth,
Oh, wow, okay.
They show us our wounds, our needs, those beliefs that might be holding us back.
So instead of pushing those parts away, we need to like shine a light on them.
Exactly. And that's where self-compassion comes in. It's not about beating ourselves up for those parts.
Right.
It's about understanding them.
Okay.
It's about saying, hey, we all make mistakes,
Yeah.
We all have flaws. And those imperfections, they're part of what makes us human.
It's like we have to offer ourselves the same kindness
Yes.
that we would offer a friend who's going through something difficult.
Exactly. And, part of that kindness involves forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Yeah, forgiving ourselves for messing up.
For the times we projected our stuff onto other people.
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button.
Ooh, I like that.
Both for ourselves and for our relationships.
So it sounds like the more we understand and accept those parts of ourselves, the less power those projections have over us.
100%, yeah.
It's not about being perfect.
Nope.
It's about being whole.
Exactly. And that wholeness, that self-acceptance, that's what ultimately frees us from those like reactive patterns.
Wow. This has been like a really eye-opening deep dive into this whole world of projection.
It's fascinating stuff, isn't it?
It really is. And, it's definitely given me a lot to think about.
Me too. And remember, it's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not like you figure it all out overnight.
Right, right.
There's always more to discover about ourselves.
So true. And on that note, dear listener,
yeah,
what if, like understanding your projections, it could not only transform your relationships, but also help you feel more at peace,
Right.
more free within yourself.
Totally.
Just something to think about.
Something to ponder.
Until next time, keep exploring those fascinating minds of yours.